Chapter 18, Dark Forest. Within the silence of the forest, Karnik's mind started drifting back to when he was small, and his father told him about what had happened to his biological grandfather, how he had died with honor, fighting for his country, saving his men and sacrificing himself for those in the village. Karnik also thought about how even though his grandfather had been a great man doing what was right, he and his men had been disgraced by the deeds of others. Karnik prayed that he and his men wouldn't experience a similar fate. He tried shrugging off the thoughts and focused on one of the stories his father loved to tell, one that was much more pleasant. Carl's grandfather served in the U.S. Navy aboard the USS Tutuila. He never told Carl much about his time in Vietnam, except a few of the more colorful adventures he'd had. When young Carl would ask, his father would start out by gazing at Carl as if deep in thought, and then he would begin with, "This one time. This one time your Opa was walking down a path along the banks of the Mekong. There was kind of a marketplace with dried fish and other things for sale. Well, one day he spotted the biggest bloated hog floating down the river. It looked like a hot air balloon getting ready to pop." At that moment, he would pause and look at young Carl to see if he was still interested. Carl was always interested in the stories, even if he had heard them before. After being satisfied that Carl was interested, his father would continue, "Then he saw something that changed the way he conducted myself for the rest of the time he was there." He would then shiver, like suddenly a cold chill was going through his body, and continue, "You would not believe it. He spotted 4 to 5 kids with sticks pull the hog over to the bank and drag it out. He then watched as they cut it up." "Why did they do that?" Carl asked. "Well, son, he left at that point. He still had places to go and things to do and felt like he had seen enough." Carl was puzzled and asked, "How did that change what he did there?" His father looked at him, and based on the puzzled look on Carl's face, his father knew that he was ready for the punchline. "Because," he said, then paused for a moment. "Later, when he walked back down through the marketplace, little remained of the hog, and the boys had a stand in the marketplace where they were selling what they called monkey on a stick." "Wow," Carl said. He ran off to the other room. He knew that he would be telling that story to his best friend the next day at school. Nostalgia was a rare comfort in times like these, and Karnik clung to it. But as he glanced at his watch again, his anxiety grew. There had been radio silence from Sawyer for far too long, and the deadline to evacuate loomed. He had briefed the other platoon leaders. The soldiers stood prepped and primed, awaiting his command. The radio sat static, a silent testament to the situation's gravity, while Karnik willed it to spring to life with news. However, with each passing moment, Karnik's seasoned instincts warned him. Hope for a reassuring message was dimming with every tick of the clock. Karnik moved away from the area designated for the talk and began to walk over to where the other platoon sergeants were located. "Everyone ready to move?" he asked the others as he looked down at his watch. 8 minutes to go. "Yeah, the men are all ready to move out. You sure you don't want to know where each platoon is heading?" one of the sergeants asked Karnik. Karnik replied, "No, and don't tell any of the others. If you're captured, you have no information to give about the others. Now get ready to move out on my signal, and good luck." All of them could feel how real the moment was. The feeling of splitting up had everyone stressed, even though they all knew it was the best for their survival. Karnik's gaze settled on his watch again. Just 5 minutes left. He stood close to the RTO, mentally urging a signal through the silence. But the only sound was the increasing roar of the wind. Yet when he observed his surroundings, no trees swayed, no dust lifted. An unsettling realization struck him. "Vehicles approaching," he murmured. Instantly he sprang into action, barking out commands. "Take cover in the tree line, 360-degree perimeter. Push back 100 yards, prepare for attack." "Looks like we're going to have it out right here after all," Karnik thought, and he said out loud. Then, raising his voice with authority, he commanded, "Hold your fire until I give the word." He motioned for his platoon to divide, positioning 2 squads on either side of the entrance, effectively boxing in the advancing vehicles, cutting off any potential escape route. Karnik's posture remained unwavering as the hum of the approaching vehicles grew more pronounced. His combat experience had ingrained in him a steadfast calm that few possessed. Every sense was finely tuned, absorbing every detail of the approaching threat. The glow from the vehicle's headlights grew brighter, casting a steady light on the tree-lined road. Karnik's years in combat had taught him to look beyond the immediate, to anticipate movements and understand intentions before they manifested. He already had scenarios playing out in his mind, each decision calculated and precise. The element of surprise was on their side, and Karnik intended to use it. He'd faced situations like this many times before, and each one had further solidified his tactical prowess. The upcoming confrontation would be no different. He believed in his team, their training. The impending battle would be a testament to their capabilities. Karnik gave out one last command to his men. Let 'em pass and stay down. They were all hugging the ground so closely that there was no sight of them in the darkness. The first vehicle passed. It was a 5-ton. Then 2 buses passed, and then a Humvee followed by a pickup pulling a horse trailer. What the hell? They brought horses to hunt us with. Karnik was very confused. The first 3 looked like theirs, but where would they have gotten a Humvee and truck with a horse trailer? Karnik thought, knowing he had to get a closer look. Hold your positions, he ordered. Smith, on me. Smith was one of Karnik's most reliable platoon sergeants and close friend, at least as close of a friend as anyone could become with Karnik. Staying in a crouched position, Sergeant Smith rose to his feet. He and Karnik moved quickly at first until they were just behind the horse trailer. After it came to a stop, they dared not make another move. Once all the motors had shut down, time seemed to just tick away with no movement. There was nothing but silence for a few minutes, and then things started popping, clicking, and squeaking. Karnik could hear 2 people talking, but couldn't make out what they were saying. Then suddenly it was really clear. Where are they? Roberts asked. They are definitely here for us. Karnik thought, You're surrounded, asshole. Karnik flipped his rifle from safety to fire and gripped it tight. Smith followed quietly, followed his lead and was ready. We're late. I gave them orders to move out if we had not returned by 2200. What the hell? Karnik blurted out. That you, sir? Karnik could hear the weapons being switched from their safe position as he stepped out from around the back of the trailer. To his surprise, he was met by the barrel of a revolver just a hair from his nose. As his eyes focused on what was in his path, Karnik asked, What the hell is Willie's feed stow? Sierra had moved in and was waiting there for them to make their move. She had caught their shadows from the brake lights when they had come to a stop. Almost 2 months on the run makes a person notice things, cowboy, she said as she withdrew the pistol from Karnik's face. Thanks. It was about to give me frostbite. You really should warm that thing up before putting it in someone's face. It's just polite, Karnik said. He couldn't believe she had got the drop on him. Oh, it was about to get really warmed up, darling. Karnik couldn't tell if she was playing or not. Karnik, what are you doing here? Sawyer asked. I thought for sure you would have followed my orders. Sir, that is just what we were going to do until the sound of your convoy stopped us. Us? About that time, Sergeant Smith stepped out, and then Karnik let out in his commanding voice that made the trees want to obey. Bring it in. 50-50 security. I see you picked up a few new items while you were out. Did you get fuel? That was Karnik's way of asking, who the hell are these people, and where the hell did they get a Humvee? Yes, the fuel was there, just like Parker said. Sawyer looked down at the ground, trying hard to control his emotions. Sergeant, Parker was killed in action. Sawyer knew that it wouldn't be the last time this would happen, but it never got easier. Without asking who, where, or why, all Karnik wanted to know was one thing, and that was where his soldier and friend was now. As soon as the information had been relayed to him, Karnik called for one person. Darian? He didn't have to call a second time. Darian had turned into a soldier in a day. Once Darian stopped in front of him, Karnik spoke. Son, you have given up a great deal today. The life you knew, the comforts of home, your innocence. And now I'm afraid to say that you'll have to give up even more. Darian was frozen in place, having no idea what was going on. Then Karnik broke the bad news to him. Darian, Parker was killed in action. Darian had no clue how to handle the news. After today's events, he was on overload. Parker had been his mentor for years now. He'd been the one person Darian could talk to about things happening in his life. Today was a day Darian needed him the most, and he had tried all day to speak to Parker, but never had the chance. Now Darian never would have the chance to tell Parker how excited he was to be part of this with him. Darian, Karnik paused. You with us? Hell yeah, Darian said while doing his best not to let others see him cry. Karnik put his hand on Darian's shoulder. Come on, soldier, let's go bury our friend. Burial detail, Sawyer cried out, and at that moment the rumbling started. Those two words were the moment when they all felt the severity of the situation. After ensuring that Parker was laid to rest honorably, Sawyer briefed Karnik and the other platoon sergeants on recent events. The revelation about the extent of surveillance on them, and every American citizen ignited a fury within them. They felt a collective urge to retaliate, not just for the infringement on their rights or being labeled as traitors, but also for Parker and those who had tragically fallen in St. Louis. Concluding the discussion, Sawyer decided to maintain complete radio silence for the return journey to their base camp. "Sir, you are sure the pissant is dead?" Karnik asked. "Oh, he is dead. I saw to it that he had a silent night," Robert said, as he patted the side of his Noreen 30-06 with the suppressor still attached. Satisfied he wouldn't be seeing Womack again, Karnik turned from Robert and back to Sawyer. He had only one question. "When do we leave for Arkansas, sir?" "We will not be," Sawyer expressed. Karnik cocked his head ever so slightly and up, while both of his eyes slightly squinted, one more so than the other. It was a look that said, "Come again." "This last mission taught me something. I can, and we can, no longer operate as members of the U.S. Army." As Sawyer looked around, he could see that he had their complete attention. "We were played today. We did just as our training taught us, and that was our mistake." Sawyer began to pace in front of the assembled leadership and thought of what to say. "We have to retrain our brains to think like the independent force this militia is, or we will fail. What are the things we need most?" "Give me the top 3, he said and pointed at his men. "Area of operation," said one of the sergeants. "Yes, next." "More supplies to fight with." "Yes, now one more." "Intelligence," another sergeant said. "Yes, but intel gathering should be a constant thing. I believe what we need as a rogue militia fighting against a tyrannical government is the people on our side." Sawyer interjected. "You are right, sir, and I know just how to do it." All eyes went to Karnik. This was what Sawyer had created this discussion for, hoping to tap into the tactical mind Karnik possessed, and it appeared he had been successful. "Do we know what became of the rest of the 138th? If not, we need to find out when we—" "They were all arrested this morning before leaving the armory," Robert blurted out, cutting Karnik off. "Do you know where they are being held?" Karnik was soaking up the information like a cactus after a heavy desert rain. The gears were churning in his head now. "Last I heard, before heading here, they were being taken to the National Guard Armory in Jefferson City. At least the enlisted men were. The senior NCO and officers were taken to St. Louis." Robert wished he had more information to give, but they had limited cell coverage traveling to the area from northern Arkansas when everything started breaking out in St. Louis. That was all the information Karnik needed. One side of his mouth rose ever so slowly, with the hint of a smile coming on. That was Karnik's happy face. He had his plan. "We take the capital." The others could not believe that was his plan. It seemed very ambitious for 134 men and 2 women, who were also poorly supplied. "I'm afraid you are thinking too big there, Sergeant." Sawyer couldn't keep from having a little hint of laughter in his voice. He thought to himself, Karnik is only a mastermind at the smaller missions. This apparently is a little too much. "No, sir," Karnik said with a great deal of confidence. Upon hearing those words, Sawyer, who was looking downward at the ground, brought his attention to Karnik very quickly. As Sawyer opened his mouth to address him, Karnik had already begun speaking. "Sir, we have all the men we need trained and ready to fight. Our men are no fewer than 500, and those men are where the weapons and ammunition are located. All in one place, sir, and everyone believes we are running for Arkansas. The gratefully departed general is a testament to that." Sawyer was disappointed in himself, disappointed that he hadn't made the same connections as Karnik. He prided himself on being able to create a reasonable battle plan, but Karnik seemed to put the best of them to shame. "Do you have a suggestion for a jumping-off point for the assault?" Sawyer asked, knowing the answer. Karnik said with complete confidence and a touch of nostalgia, "Yes, sir. Rocktown." Within minutes of receiving the order, the United Constitutional Militia swiftly loaded their gear onto vehicles. Sawyer had chosen to delegate most of the strategizing to Karnik. It was a gamble, but it was grounded in Karnik's proven track record of crafting solid plans. An advantage they had was the diverse origins of the members of the former 138th Bravo Company. They hailed from various parts of the state. This meant that they had a solid grasp of the terrain and could navigate without heavy reliance on maps. For Karnik's strategy to be effective, they needed to reach their destination by dawn, before the bodies at the Highway Department maintenance yard were found. The discovery would make traversing the region almost insurmountable. Retracing their steps was also out of the question. Their route had to veer further south, which, according to Karnik, would take them near Springfield before they could pivot northward again. The serenity surrounding Springfield at 3 in the morning offered solace to those unable to find sleep. As lights of the town flickered by, many gazed out, reading street signs and reminiscing about home, a home forever altered by recent events, a home that some might never revisit. Occasional sighs of disbelief broke the silence, reflecting the shock of the day's events. They all adhered to an unwritten code of the infantry: seize any chance to rest. Those not on watch yearned for the embrace of sleep. Karnik, at the forefront, had transitioned from the 5-ton truck to a Humvee. The others in the convoy had only one directive: follow the Humvee, even though its proximity to Springfield raised eyebrows. Sawyer, tailing Karnik in the 5-ton, itched to grab the radio and inquire about their approach to the city. So far, county roads had been their safest bet. But given their agreement on total radio silence, Sawyer had no choice but to place his faith in Karnik's judgment. Karnik, foreseeing the necessity for adaptability and communication, prepared himself for such a moment. Extracting his notebook, he quickly penned down his thoughts, tore out the sheet, and handed it over. "Smith, secure this onto one of the poles," he instructed. Earlier, he had directed Sergeant Smith to trim several lengthy branches about 2 inches thick and roughly 5 feet long, specifically for this purpose. Efficiently, Smith slipped the note into a Ziploc bag, a remnant from his MRE, and affixed it to the pole's end. Karnik smacked his driver on the shoulder. "Turn here." After the turn, they were now riding on a 3-lane road and traveling just outside of Springfield. "Passenger side and slow down." Karnik screamed to his driver due to the noise coming from the Humvee, which was doing 55 miles per hour. The driver just nodded and began executing Karnik's orders, while Smith prepared to send the message by unzipping his window. "What are they doing?" Sawyer asked his driver, knowing he also had no clue. It didn't take long to figure it out, though. The stick poking out of the back window was quite the giveaway. Quickly rolling down his window, Sawyer was eager to receive intelligence. "Leave it up to Karnik to find a way," Sawyer said and chuckled. "What was that, sir?" the driver yelled. "Keep it steady," Sawyer shouted over the hum of the 5-ton's engine. Even inside the cab, the noise was considerable, and with the window down, the noise made it hard to discern sounds. But soon, he managed to get close enough to snatch the pole. It turned out to be a smoother maneuver than he'd anticipated. Retrieving the note felt like unwrapping a surprise gift. Smith's secure attachment of the note was commendable. Without hesitation, Sawyer began to scan the message. Taking the direct route north via I-44, exiting after 56 miles. Alarm bubbled inside Sawyer. He murmured to himself, "The interstate will be under surveillance." Yet, he continued to peruse the message. "They know we are heading south. Nobody will be checking the interstates for us traveling north or for a convoy led by a Humvee. I feel it is worth the risk. 1 honk, yes. 2, no. Do we proceed?" Sawyer was in deep thought. Karnik's plan was very risky, one that could cost them everything, and put bystanders' lives at risk. It wasn't a move he would have considered 2 days ago, but now was a time for taking chance. "Honk 1 time," Sawyer called out, addressing the driver loud and clearly so that there were no mistakes. The driver did as he was ordered, and the Humvee speed up. The miles clicked off one by one. Each mile marker sign brought them closer to their destination, Rocktown. No man in the convoy was happier to see the exit for mile marker 145 than Sawyer. He had faith in Karnik, but he was ultimately the one to blame if things didn't work out. Karnik traveled the back roads once again, and few in the convoy knew where they were. All the men could see out the windows were trees, hills, and drop-offs. They drove for another hour before turning down what appeared to be a deserted gravel road. Karnik's driver looked at him, awaiting directions. "Drive until I tell you to stop, Private," Karnik said nonchalantly, as he marveled how much things had changed since he had been here as a little boy. They passed a road sign with rusted bullet holes in it that read, 4 Mile Road. Memories of the place came rushing back to Karnik. They mostly consisted of Angelique. She was his childhood love, his first and only for that matter. A distant memory, he mused, but the surprises didn't end there. As they neared her old residence, a glimpse of a couple on a front yard swing caught his attention. Could it really be Angelique's parents? Every other dwelling appeared abandoned, probably because of the deteriorating state of the road. Karnik considered the area perfect for their camp and strategizing. There were fresh springs, an abundance of wildlife, and the thick woods provided a natural alarm, ensuring they'd be alerted to any approaching footsteps from miles away. Sergeant Karnik found that being back on 4 Mile Road, memories flooded his mind. He recalled the vivid image of the girl who dances in the woods, whose name he later learned to be Angelique. As he moved around the encampment, checking security and attending to the needs of his men, his thoughts drifted back in time. He understood the crucial role of morale during moments like this, and made his presence a reassuring one among the men. Now Karnik often found himself reminiscing about the year he had spent with Angelique during their youth, up until the point when his family had abruptly relocated. During their youth, Sergeant Karnik and Angelique had been inseparable. They spent nearly every minute together, both at school and after school hours. It was challenging for them to find opportunities to be together outside of school, especially because Angelique's parents had forbidden her from dating until she turned 16. However, like many teenagers, they found ways to circumvent the rules. Angelique often spent a significant amount of time at the far end of the field near the woods, and that's where they would frequently meet in secret. It had worked out really well for Angelique, more than for Carl. Often Carl felt as if he had just been there to be her punching bag, but those were only the times when he was not looking up at her from the ground, after being flipped, thrown, pushed, or pulled to it by her. Angelique had really enjoyed having someone not just to practice on, but also to train. Many hours after school and on weekends had been spent running through the woods or sparring with each other. On many occasions, they had practiced hiding and camouflaging skills when Angelique's parents had happened to almost catch them. Sergeant Karnik continued to move between guard positions, assessing the area. While high ground was usually preferred, they found themselves in a valley with their vehicles. However, Karnik had strategically positioned the men along the perimeter, ensuring that the security detail followed the ridge of the valley. This arrangement allowed them to maintain a strong defensive position despite the geographical challenges. One great advantage of the area was Raven Bluff. The bluff overlooked the major road in the area, yet was a good 1.5 miles away. This provided a great tactical advantage on the east side of camp. Anyone coming for them from the south would be easily spotted. South of camp ran a creek filled with fresh spring water, water the men desperately needed. To the north and west were nothing but woods for miles, with the exception of the gravel road running northwest. As Karnik moved along the perimeter, he put the men on a rest cycle of 2 up, 2 down. It was the first chance they'd had to get some real rest. At this point, they were happy to sleep on the ground under the shade of the trees above. At almost every security point Karnik came to, they asked the same question: "What's next, Sergeant?" The problem was that Karnik really didn't know at this point, but that wasn't what he told his men. Just gathering some intel to put the final touches on the operation. It wasn't a lie. They were waiting for intel now that they had a secure way of obtaining it through Robert's connection with Sam. They also had an operation to plan. It just hadn't been started. Each time he answered his men, Karnik hoped that there would be useful intelligence when he returned to the TOC. After completing his rounds of the perimeter, he ensured that those in the camp were given an opportunity to also get some rest. Those who weren't in the camp worked endlessly to ensure that the equipment was ready to go on a moment's notice. Everyone in the militia was dedicated to the task ahead. Karnik always felt that he was serving with great soldiers. Now he felt that they were much more than great. They were historic men. They were the kind of men who were written about in history books, and he was proud to lead them. Karnik's visit to the tent that held the TOC was not what he hoped it would be. It was frustrating. Karnik and Commander Sawyer started the same rest cycle they had the men on, even though neither wanted to rest. Each time Karnik relieved Commander Sawyer, there was still no intel, and that was the way it went the rest of the day and all night. By the next morning, with no intel coming in, Karnik let being back in the area get the better of him. He decided to chase some old memories, although that wasn't how he described it to Commander Sawyer. "Commander, I am going out on foot to do some reconnaissance of the area. I want to check out the house we passed," he said with confidence, attempting to hide his real motive. "Check out if they have fuel tanks while you're out." Sawyer looked up slowly with a "who you trying to fool" expression. "Will do, sir," and he was off.